Hi, this is Kevin Trainer. Welcome to my tutorial on the backup, restore, truncate, unload, reload exercise. Now, this is related to one of the assignments that I have for my databases course, and it's going to be using one of the example databases that comes with our textbook. And our textbook is MySQL second edition by Joel Maroc. And in anticipation of the class doing their final projects, I want to make sure that all the students are pretty comfortable with the idea of taking a database and dumping it to an SQL script, reloading it from an SQL script. I want them to be able to use MySQL Workbench to kind of unload the data from the tables. This is the thing that I'm going to do in order to pass them the data for their final project. And of course, I want them to be able to reload the tables because they'll have to do that from my data when they do their final project. So this is kind of practice for some of the skills in the final project. And I'm going to do it on the AP database. And then as an assignment, I'm going to have the students do the same thing on the My Guitar Shop database. Okay? So here's the procedure we're going to follow. I have it here as a recipe. First, we want to make sure that we have a complete and pristine copy of whatever database we're working with. Okay, now this won't be an issue so much on your project, but in our work with the textbook, we've been changing the values in the database, and we want to make sure that we got the values as they came from the factory as they were. So there's a database creation script for each of the databases, and we're going to run ours to make sure that we have a fresh copy of the AP database. Then we're going to go in and we're going to use a feature in Workbench that I don't think we've looked at yet. It's called the Schema Inspector, and it has a view that's going to allow us to look at what all the tables are and how many rows are in the tables. Okay, so then we know it's fully loaded. Then we're going to learn how to back it up using Workbench, okay, which is to dump the whole thing using Workbench. We're going to learn how to restore it using Workbench. In this case, we're not going to restore it from the script that we got from the text, but the one that we just created in step 3. I'm going to show you how to save table data table by table using the Workbench tool. That'll give us a bunch of comma separated value files. At this point, we will have essentially unloaded each of the tables. And so I'm going to show you how to truncate the data in each of the tables so that we're left with a schema with no data. We have the structure, but no data. That's actually one of the backup options, so we could have done it this way. And then I'm going to show you how to write a script to reload each of the tables and run that on Workbench. And finally, I'm going to show you how to use this schema inspector feature of the Workbench tool in order to make sure that we got all the rows back in the tables. Okay, which is something that you're going to have to do when you do this on your final project, when you load the test data that I give you. All right, so let's get started. Okay, so I mentioned that we're going to be using the AP database. So I'm going to pull this guy off and hide him over here on my other monitor. And here we are, we're in Workbench, and you can see that we already have the AP schema, but of course I don't know how fresh this is. Okay, so I'm going to drop it. I guess I could drop it. I could say drop schema and confirm and drop the schema. Except that it turns out that the script that was given to us with the to load the example databases from the textbook, it begins by dropping the schema. So we don't even have to do that ourselves explicitly. So let's go find that. So I'm going to open to go to find a script, and on my machine, I want to find my way to the SQL directory that we created way back when. And I'm kind of wondering, is that possibly, do I possibly have one here? Nope, I don't have one here. Okay, so we're not going there. But I happen to know where it is on my machine. And so if I do that, if I go to Documents, and it's in my courseware development, and it's actually under another course, which is another database course. And I go to the MySQL directory, that's the one that we set up, and then there's a subdirectory db setup, and there is a script that sets up all the databases, and so I'm going to run that. So it's called create databases.sql. I'm going to double click on that and open it. And now I'm going to run that. You can see it begins with a drop. It begins with a drop that won't fail if it doesn't exist, because it has drop database if exists AP. So that's going to take care of us. Let's run the script. And I look down, it looks like everything ran just fine. All right. So let's go over to the schemas panel here on the left and click on the little refresh icon. And we can see that AP is over here. This is the accounts payable example database. And here's where we're going to look at a new feature that I don't think I've emphasized so far in this course, and it's called the schema inspector. So we can double click on AP so that we're using AP. It should go into bold type. And then right click, and then the third option is schema inspector. So let's look at that. And it has a whole bunch of information, but what we want to do is we just want to see what's in the tables, and you can see what's in the tables. Okay, so here are all the 7 tables that make up the database or schema, and you can see how many rows are in each of the tables. Now, I just want to warn you that sometimes when I come to this, especially if I've been working with my database, if I've been, loading data, changing things, sometimes the values here are not fresh, and you have to go down to the bottom right and click refresh. Okay, no, we do this, we get the same values because they were fresh, but I just had an example not a half hour ago where I had stale values that I needed to click on it to get to the refresh. So here are the 7 tables. They're in alphabetical order, and here are the row counts. And I just want to record the row counts. I wanted to be able to print off this whole page, but that's not particularly easily done. So instead of that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull on an editor that I have. Okay. And I'm just going to type the row counts. So 75, 0, 118, 114, 5, 8, 122. So eventually when I do this table loading from the comma separated value files, I'm going to expect to get back to the row counts that I have here. And if I don't, that means I've had a problem. Okay, so this is just my check. So I'm going to pull this over in my list of things. And we'll come back to that when we want to show that we got things to work. Okay? All right, so we have a copy of the database. It's fully populated. Okay, that sounds good. Let's practice how to do a backup or dump of the database. And we've already taken a look at this in the class, but I'm just going to close these for the heck of it. I'm going to show you again. What we do is we go up to, while we're in Workbench, we go up to the menu and we click on Server, Data Export. Okay, now we get into this dialog. So we have to pick our, before we do that, okay, before we do that, let's go create a directory to put all of our files in for this little project, okay? Well, how am I going to do that? Well, I'm working on my Mac, so I'm going to open up a Finder window. Okay, and let me bring it over here. A place where it's really easy to store and find files on my Mac is in my home directory. Okay, that just has my username, Kevin Trainer. So I'm going to go there. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a directory that I can put all the files for this exercise in, because I'm going to have to be able to find them. So I'm going to click out here and I say that I want a, well, it's not working. I don't know why. I guess I have to click in the open space to get a new folder. And I'm going to put an underscore on it to get it to sort to the top. Okay. And I'm going to call this dump, restore, unload, reload. Okay, you get the idea. Some kind of name like that. All right, and that sorts way up to the top, so that means that's going to be easy to find. Okay, all right, so let's pull that off somewhere. Okay, and so now we know where we're going to do. We're going to dump a copy of the database there with this data export. And I kind of interrupted myself, so let's go back and take this from the top. I go up to the menu, click on Server, Data Export. That's how I got to that view. Over in the left panel, you select the database. Database says you want to export. We only want to do AP. Okay. Over here on the right, that has all the schema objects. Now, the only schema objects we have are tables, and they're all checked, so that's good. Now, let's come down here. So it says, right now it says dump data only. Well, I don't want to do that. So I can do the structure and the data only, the structure only. So right now, I want to dump the structure and the data. That's a full backup. Okay, that's a real dump. Okay, so what other options do I want to pick? Well, I want to make sure that there is a statement created at the very beginning of the script that drops the schema. Okay, that's going to work the best. So right down here at the bottom in the middle, include create schema. That's going to do that. And of these many export options, I guess there are only two. The one down here, export as self-contained file, that's where we want to go. Except that I don't want to put it in this dumps directory that I've been using for these. I want to put it in the directory that we had before. Okay. And I just have to remind myself of what I called everything before. So I have to apologize for my cheating, but I want to make this consistent. Okay. And what do I want to call this? Well, first of all, I want to put it in the proper directory. Oh, here it is. Here's the directory that I have. Okay. So I want to go to the proper directory. So let's find it. It's the one in my home directory that begins with an underscore, dump, restore, unload, reload. That's good. Okay. And I'm going to double click on that. And then what am I going to call this? And I want to call this, this is where I, let me borrow that, guys. Okay. What did I call it? Oh, I called it AP underscore populated, because I have the data in it, okay, DB dump. Okay, I think that it describes it fairly well, right? And I'm just going to save. And now I'm going to come down here and start export. And I get a warning, I really need to reinstall the tools on my machine. I get a warning that some of my versions of the tools don't match. But things seem to work okay. I'm going to have to allocate some time within the next week to just to install fresh versions of everything. So continue anyway, and it looks like I got a warning or two, but everything worked out. Okay, so let's go look at that, right? All right, so that's the export. I'm going to close that. Let's go and open the script that came out of that. Well, in this dump, restore, unload directory, I have it right here. AP populated DB dump. Okay, let's open that. Well, you know, this looks a lot like the scripts that came with the textbooks that we could use to restore the database. It's a full restore, and you'll see that way up at the top, the first thing it says, because we checked that option, it says create database if not exists AP. Okay, so we do create the database if we don't already have the database. Okay, the thing that's good about this is that when you do this, your script becomes insensitive to whether or not you already have a database loaded. Okay, I can run it now. Let me run this. I'm going to come down and clear it. Right? I can run it now. I already have the AP database loaded. Okay, so will it run with the database already loaded? Yes, it will. So it ran. Okay, so that ran just fine. All right. Now, what if I had already dropped that schema? Would it run equally well there? Well, that's because we have this create a database if not exists AP up here. Because we asked for that feature in our dump, it should work equally well either way. So let's go ahead and drop that schema manually. Okay, and we can see it's gone from the list of schemas over here in the navigator panel. And let's just go, I don't want to run this with just one statement highlighted. I want to run the whole thing. So I'm going to run it again. And it ran again. It's a little bit hard to tell there because I didn't erase it. But let's refresh the schemas. And there's AP again. So that's working great. Okay, so that worked pretty well. Okay, so that's how you do a dump, a full dump, a populated dump that is a dump of both the structure and the data. That's what you typically want to do when you're working and you want to restore the database to some previous state. To save the state, you take that dump. To restore the date, you run this. You run the script. Okay, so let's just be sure that when we do this from our script, as compared to the one that came with the textbook, that we have the right number of rows in the tables. So how do we do that? Well, we go over to the AP schema. We right-click, go to the schema inspector. Okay. Click on tables. And we can click on the refresh button just for the heck of it. And let's remind ourselves of what the counts were that we were expecting. So we were expecting 750118, 750118, 11458, 11458, and then we end with 122, 122. So that worked. Okay. Now, what could have not worked about it? Well, because of the way these relational databases work, we could have had a problem if we try. Oh, I'm speaking out of turn here. It should work just fine. If we dumped it en masse and we reloaded it en masse, it should always work just fine. Later on, when we load these things manually, there's a chance for failure, and that's the thing we're going to want to check for. But so we're checking here just to be careful. Okay, what do we do next? Well, what we want to do next is we want to be able to save the data that's in the tables to these comma separated value files, these comma delimited files. Why? Well, because it's a really good way to exchange data with, say, partners. Okay, it's pretty kind of independent of your database. It just has the keys and the values. So how do we do this? Well, what we can do is we can do it with Workbench. So here we've got 7 tables, and what we're going to do is we're going to go and we're going to unload, or we're going to export each one. So how are we going to do that? So let's go up to the first one, General Ledger Accounts, and go over to this rightmost table grid icon and click that. And you'll see that we're seeing all the data that's in the table. Okay. And then let's look across the toolbar for the result grid, and you'll see that there's this export-import capability. Okay. Now, we're going to use the export capability here. I would have you use the import capability right next to it later, except that a year ago when I designed all this, it didn't work very well. Okay, I couldn't get it to work. So we're going to write scripts in order to do the reloads. Someday you might be able to do it with the import feature. That could be today for all I know, but I'm not going to waste the time only to find out that it's still broken. Okay, so this left icon is for export. I'm going to export it, and it comes up, and it's headed at the right directory because that's kind of sticky. It's at that dump, restore, unload, reload directory. But this name up here is sticky. This is from the last time that I did this. And what I need to do is I need to type in the name of the table that I'm on, and I'm on General Ledger Accounts. So I'm just going to say general underscore ledger accounts. Okay? And it's going to be given the file extension CSV for comma separated values. So let's click save. Okay. And it looks like it worked. Now, how can we find out that it did work? Let's go open up that file. Okay. So I'm going to open a Finder, and I'm going to go to dump, restore, unload, right? And I've got general ledger accounts.csv. And interestingly, I get the icon here for Excel because I have Excel on this machine, and Excel will open a comma separated value file, but it looks like a spreadsheet when you open it, and probably not what we want to see. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click and say I want to open it with a text editor. I like, in fact, let's look at it with text edit. That's the default text editor for the Mac. And you can see it right there. Now, what I don't like about the text edit is the way it's configured right now, it doesn't tell you how many lines I have. So let's go and open up with another text editor that I have that will show us the number of lines. So I'm going to right click, open with, and this is an open source. This is kind of a crybabyware tool. They don't charge you for it, but they beg for contributions every time you update it. Okay, so we're going to open it with TextMate, and I'm going to come over here and I'm going to see, oh, that's cool, that's got line numbers too. So the first line that we get, it puts out the column names. So there are two columns: account number, account description. Okay, and then the first data row is on line 2. If you look at the number of rows that we have, we've got 76 lines that have data on them. There's, I guess, a carriage return after 76, so that begins the 77th. But there are 76 rows. The first one has a title, so there's 75 data rows. Now, does that make sense? Well, if you go back and look at this general ledger accounts table, you'll see that in fact has 75 rows in it. So that makes a lot of sense. You don't have to check all these. They should work just fine, but I just want to let you know that we did get that to prove out. So we did the general ledger account, and then we need to do each of these in order. Now, it turns out that invoice archive is empty in this state of the database, but I'm not going to assume that that's always going to be true. So I'm going to go here, and I'm going to click on it. You can see that it is empty, but I'm going to export it anyway. Sorry, I have to click on the actual icon there. And then again, I can call this invoice underscore archive. All right. And that worked. Let's confirm that that one worked. Invoice archive. That's good. All right. Let's go to the next one. Now we have invoice line items. Okay. And let's click on the icon here. And the file name is going to be invoice, which we already have that word, so let's just put the ones in that we don't have. Invoice line items. And it's really important that you get the names of the tables correct, all right? Because you have to know what the files are going to be called. So that one worked. And let's do the next one is invoices. Oh, let's do that one. Okay. Click on the export. And again, I'm going to cannibalize my file name and just say invoices. and save, and that works. And then the next one's going to be terms. Okay, and I'm going to export those. All right, so terms, pretty good. Now I've got two more, vendor contacts and vendors. So let's do vendor contacts. Okay, click on this. Vendor contacts. Okay, and then one more, go down here, click all the way on the right, click the export icon, and let's do a little surgery to make the file name say vendors. Okay, so let's go check it in the Finder here to see that I have all these, and you can see that I do. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 CSV files. The last one I did was vendors. It put them in the same order because they were listed in alphabetical order over in the Navigator panel, and they're listed in alphabetical order in the Finder, so that's good. And let's just open vendors, open with, and again, I don't know why we're having a hard time with that, open with TextMate. So we're going to open up that. And this is a busier table. There's certainly a lot more columns, vendor ID, vendor name, vendor address 1, vendor address 2, so all that. And then if you come down here, you'll see that there are 124 lines, but 123 with data, and one isn't really data, it's really the column name. So we have 122 data rows. And did we have 122 rows to begin with? Well, yeah, if you look at the counts of what I had, I did have 122 rows in my last table. That was the vendors table. So that's dumped out there pretty well. Okay. All right. So we've got that. Now, so now we have a fully populated database, and plus we've unloaded the tables, so we have an individual backup of each of the tables. So we could actually reload any of the individual tables anytime that we wanted to. And in your final project, you're going to have the situation that you're going to create the schema. You're going to create the structure of the schema from the logical data model that I give you, okay? But we're not going to have you input the data. We're going to have you load the data from CSV files, okay? So you should be able to do that. So, of course, when you create the schema, if you don't put any data, it will be unpopulated, right? So when you go over and look, if you went over to your schema and you right-clicked and went to the schema inspector, if there were no data in it, if you went to columns, tables, well, they'd all have 0 rows in them because you wouldn't have entered any data yet. Okay. Well, what if you have entered some data and you want to get to the point where you have no data? You'll recall that the way that we do that is we issue a truncate on the table, and it leaves the structure intact, but it gets rid of all the data. So what we want to do is we want to run a truncate for each of the tables. So let's consider doing that. So let's close a lot of these babies here, and let's create a new script file, okay? And I'm going to actually open the one that I already done so I can do a little copying. Okay, but what do we want to do to truncate the files? Well, first of all, let's be safe and begin with use AP. Okay, So that's fine. And then we're going to say I want to truncate table. And what's my first one called? Well, it's called general ledger accounts. Okay. Okay, so we know that had the data in it, right? Well, if I run this, it should drop all the rows out of general ledger accounts. Well, let's look. First of all, just to check, let's see the data in general ledger accounts. Okay, we have it there. Let's go back and run our truncate. Ran okay. All right. Let's go back to general ledger accounts and rerun that query. Sorry. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. Let's see what would happen here. Truncate table. Cannot truncate a table reference. Oh, I got a mistake. Oh, and I know why. Because I need to truncate them in the right order. Now, the last time I did this, I had the database set up to cheat. Okay? So, let's think about order. All right. Let's close this for right now. Okay. When you go and truncate data, you're deleting it, okay? You have to get rid of everything that has foreign keys that point into things before you get rid of the tables that are being pointed to. Now, the general ledger account gets pointed to by another table. So I have a list of all the tables over here. So I'm going to bring them over. They're in the wrong order. Okay. They're in the wrong order. Okay. So let's think of things that let's think of things that have foreign keys that point into things. Okay. So I know that the invoice line items have quite a few foreign keys. We're going to cut that and put that up top. Okay. So we'll get rid of the ones with foreign keys first. Invoice archive is just a copy of invoice items, so we can get rid of that. It happens to be empty, but we want to be sure. Okay. What else points to things? Well, let's see. Invoices point to vendors. So let's get rid of let's put invoices up here next. Okay. Invoices point to terms. So I think terms, oh, sorry. Yeah, okay. Let me do it again. Invoices point to terms. That's okay. Put that up there. Okay. Vendors point to vendor contacts. Okay. And these, I think, don't point to anything at all. So we can get rid of those last. So let's us run this and see what we get. Well, let's see. We did okay on invoice line items, invoice archive, invoices. It doesn't like that. So on invoices, let's copy the response here. You can always take that and actually you can just take the response and print it out in there. So there's a constraint that we're breaking when we get rid of foreign key references, invoices, invoice ID. So we're trying to truncate table invoices and oh, invoice line items has to come before invoices. No, I think that should work. We're going to have a short pause while I fix it. Hang on. Okay, we're back. And for the life of me, I can't get this thing the way it worked for me the last time, and I think I've decided why. There's a way to tell MySQL to either pay attention to the foreign key checking or to ignore it. Okay? Now, for safety's sake, we want to be paying attention to it. Okay? But it seems that when we go to drop the data out of this database, no matter what order we seem to be doing it in, okay, it doesn't seem to want to drop it unless we turn off foreign key checking. Okay? Oh, that's fine. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to, we've got all 7 tables right here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We use AP at the top. And then we have set foreign key checks. That's control variable for the server to 0, which means false. Okay, so for right now, it's going to not going to pay any attention to that. Okay, so let's clear this again. Okay, and now let's run all the truncates. Okay. And you can see down at the bottom that they all ran just fine because it's not worried about, can I get rid of the data in one table because it's pointing at another table? We just told it to cheat. Okay? And it cheated just fine. Okay, so let's us just go look at the tables again. So let's go over and look at the schema inspector and tables view. And you can see that all the rows are gone. Okay, so we did succeed at really getting rid of all the data. So having a script like this is maybe a good way to get to the point where you're not fooling around at all with your structure of your schema, but you are getting rid of all the data. Okay, now, what if you want to load data into the tables, right? Well, first of all, where are we loading it from? Well, in your final project, I'll be giving you the tables, one file for each of the tables. I'll be giving you the files. In this exercise, well, we've created them. So let's go take a look at where they are. They're all right here. So what we need to do is we need to come up with a script that loads these. Okay? It is going to be important to do these in the right order because we do want the foreign keys properly populated. Okay? It's possible to leave the foreign key checking turned off and I did have some experience with that earlier today. But the fact is, to make sure you've got good database integrity, when you load up the data into your database, you want the foreign key checking on. Okay? All right, so let's look at that. So the first one we're going to do is for general ledger accounts. Well, actually, it's not going to be general ledger accounts because that's one that gets pointed to. So let's pick one that doesn't get pointed to. Well, oh, yeah, I'm sorry. General ledger accounts is a good one because it doesn't have any foreign keys that point to other tables. So that's a perfect one. So I am going to cheat and look at my pre-baked item. Okay. And let me do that. Okay. And I'm going to start with the general ledger accounts. Okay. And here's how it looks. Now, so let's get rid of those. Okay. Let's come here. That was our... Oh, we never saved that, right? So we're going to save that. File, save script as, and I think that's going to go to where all these other ones are. And we're going to call this AP truncate tables data. Okay? All right, so whenever we want to do that, we can run that. Okay, and so let's create another script. All right. And I'm just going to copy a little bit from a pre-baked one. And this is a script. Let's call this, let's begin right away. Why don't we do a save script as. And let's call this load tables from comma delimited files. Uh-oh. Should go here. Load data from comma delimited files. Okay. All right. So now that's going to the right place. So we're going to use AP. That makes sense. We need to turn foreign key checking back on, okay? Because we do want to load the databases. If in fact you leave it 0, you can force it, but then the fact that you might not have your indexes properly built. Okay, so we want to put foreign key checking back on with set foreign key checks equal 1. And now here's the thing we're doing for the first of the tables, okay? So let's look at this. Load data local in file. So this says to load the table, and the data is going to be from a local input file. Local means it's on the same computer as MySQL Workbench. It's on the client. It's not on the server, because that's where our files are. And it turns out on our little machines, our client and our server are the same machine, but we have to, this is the way we typically do it. And what we need is we need a path string that points to where these files are. And I'll tell you how to find that. Okay. And then, well, we're going to have the name of that file. So we dumped the general ledger accounts table to general ledger accounts.csv. So how do I find out where this how do I find out the proper path? Now, we have to use for this, we have to use what we call an absolute path. It has to start at the top of your file system. We can't use a relative path. It does say in the documentation that there's a way to use a relative path, and I beat my head in trying to get it to work, and I didn't get it to work. But so how do I do it on how would I do it on Windows? Well, an absolute path on Windows begins with the C colon for the C drive, C colon backslash, and then directory name slash directory name slash directory name slash, and then the file name as we have it. Now, how could you do that on a Mac like where I am? Well, there's a shortcut for the Mac that I didn't know for a long time. So here's what we can do. We can go and find our directory, okay, which is up here. And we can find our file. Here's our file right here. And let's right-click and say that we want to get info. And it didn't put it in our window that we're recording, but here it is. And there's a place called where, okay? And where it's going to show us the where is going to show us where this thing is. Now, it turns out that I've put this thing in the wrong, this is not the one that I want. So let's go back up. No, that's what I call it, dump, restore, unload. And so, and we want general ledger. Okay. I thought I made a mistake and I didn't. So get info. Let's bring this little information dialog over. Go to where. Okay, so here's the file path right here, right to the right of where. You can highlight the whole thing and you can right click and copy it. Okay, now let's get rid of these things and let's go put that path string on the front of the file name. So there we are, and it's all fine except I need another slash. So on the Mac the slashes go forward, on Windows they go backwards. So because I've been keeping this in my home directory, my home directory has my name on it and it's under users, and the very top of the file system is this slash. That's how all this is. And on Windows, again, you would have a directory that you'd have a path expression that begins with C colon. So this looks like just what I need to load general ledger accounts. Let's go up here. First of all, let's do a save to make sure it's saved, and let's give it a run. Let's clear this out so we can make sure we see when it runs. And let's give it a run, and let's see, use AP, set foreign key checks, load data local in file, 75 rows affected records, 75, deleted 0, and if we went and we looked at the whole message, I think sometimes you can click on here and it will show it to you on the Mac. It's not really doing it now, but because all 75 ran, that's going to do it. So that's good. Okay, so then we ought to be able to go find those. Okay, so two ways that we can confirm that that worked. Okay, one is we can go over to the schema and look at the schema inspector, and we should have that row count in the table. There it is, 75. Now, I ran this once, and I came up here and I got 76, and I went, well, that's weird. And I went down to refresh, and it went back to 75. So if you're getting the wrong answers, you may want to do the refresh, okay? All right, so let's look at these. What order do I want to do these in? All right, let's think about that. Well, when you're loading things up, you want the you want the tables that don't have any foreign keys in them. They're not pointing to anything. You want them first. Okay, you want to put up all the pointed to things, and then you want to put up all the pointer things. So the table that has the most foreign keys, has the most pointer into other tables, that goes up last. Okay, so here's the order that I've discovered works for this. What did I do? I did terms, vendor contacts, vendors, invoices. Oh, I'm sorry. That's what comes after what we have here. Invoices, invoice archive, invoice line items. So let's just take that code again. I'm going to take it from this pre-baked one that I already did. Okay. And now we're going to go back to our proper script. And let's copy these. And the only thing that's wrong with the ones from the pre-baked ones is that they're pointing to the wrong directory. So how can I do that? Well, here's what I usually do. I'm just going to say, let's get rid of the directory paths first, and then we'll copy the proper directory paths in. Okay, so did that on table 2. Now I've done it on table 3. Now let me do that on table 4. Let me do that on table 5. Table 6. And the last one, table 7. Okay. Now, let's just go up and steal this path that points to the directory where we're keeping all these files. Right? Copy that. And now we're just going to paste it in each line. Should have the right commands. So a lot of cloning here, right? Okay. And I just want to point out that the things that I loaded last are the things that have the most foreign keys in them. Invoice line items point to invoices, okay? Invoice archive and invoices point to vendors and to terms and to general ledger accounts. Vendors points to vendor contacts. Terms and general ledger accounts don't point to anything at all. So the ones that you load up first are the ones that don't point to any other tables. And then you make sure that before you load a table, you've already loaded all the tables that it points to. Okay, so this should work just fine. Let's do a couple things. First of all, let's save this. Okay, and let's make sure we have a fresh copy of the table. Okay, so let's rerun that AP populated DB dump. Okay, so we have that, and let's clear it. Okay, so this is going to give us a fresh copy of the database with data. So let's let that run a minute. And that looks like that ran okay. So let's clear that. Okay, let's run the truncate again. Okay, it truncates them all, and we don't have to worry about the order because we turned off the foreign key checking. So let's run that. Okay, and look, all the truncates worked. Okay, so now we're down to no data. Okay, and now let's take our load data from delimited files And you'll remember the first thing we do here after the use AP is we turn foreign key checking on. Okay, and then we just do a bunch of load data local in files, making sure that we point to the full the fully qualified the full path name. And when we run this, we should load them all. So we should load all 7. So let's do a clear, and let's run. Oh, and you know what we did? We accidentally I accidentally just highlighted the set foreign key checks. So when I ran that, that's what I ran. That's not what I wanted. So let's put that up at the top so it's going to run it. Let's clear this again. Now we're going to run the whole script. Let's run the whole script. And look at these. And what you want to look for over here, okay, you want to make sure that these are run in the right order. If you run them in the wrong order, like for instance, if we tried to load this, these invoice line items, if we tried to load them first without the things that they point to, we wouldn't have gotten 118 that works. So I'm going to show you everything ran the right way there. Let's go confirm that. Okay. Let's go to AP. All right. Schema inspector. Tables. Okay. So now we have our list there. And let's just compare that to our counts. And what the heck, why don't we do a refresh while we can? And that was a mistake because we lost our counts. But we want 75, 0, 118, 114. So 75, 0, 118, 114. 5, 8, 122. 5, 8, 122. Bingo, we got it. So now we're really done. Okay. If we were doing our assignment, which is, again, we would be doing this not for the AP database, but we would be doing it for the My Guitar Shop database, we would want to come back and we would want to take this directory that we have, okay, and we would probably want to change its name. Okay, so let's go up here. We probably want to change its name. Let's just make a copy of it. Okay. And let me name it like I typically name these things. I typically call these I put my last name, Trainer Kevin, dump, restore, unload, reload, practice. Okay, that's what I call it, right? So I've got that, and then I just would take this and I would compress it or zip it, and this is what I would submit. Okay, so when you look at this, when you look at the files that are in here, when we go to grade your work, we should be able to run through and we should be able to get all these things to run. Okay, this is your own dump. This is your own truncate. These are all the unloads that you did. Here's your load. And of course, we should get the right counts. And how will you know what the counts should be? Well, you'll be looking at My Guitar Shop, okay? And you'll be looking at the schema inspector for that. Now let me just show you how this could have gone wrong on the reload, Okay, I always hate to demonstrate things going badly, but they can go badly. And the question is, uh, what happens if you try to do these things in the wrong order? Okay, so let's clear everything out. Let's get a new copy of the database. Okay, so we're going to open the fully populated dump, and we're going to run that. Okay, so let's run that. Okay, and that looks like that ran fine. And I've got the truncate already loaded up here, so why don't we run the truncate? And again, if I clear this out, I can be sure to see if it ran. So I'm going to run my truncate again. And I truncated them all. That's just fine. And now I'm going to go to my load data from delimited files. And I just want to show you, if we don't do them in the right order, things will go badly. Okay? And how does that work? Well, let me just take the one that's the most dependent. Okay, or let's just take this one here. I know that has foreign keys, and that has a lot of rows. So I'm going to cut that, and I'm going to paste it up as the first load. Well, because we've turned foreign key checking on, it's not going to like that. All right, so let's do a clear down the bottom. Okay, and then let's give it a run. And as you can see, we got 64 warnings. So instead of saying that we got all the rows, said rows affected records 75, we get 64 warnings here. This is a mess. Okay, and again, if we look at the, let's copy the response. And let's just paste it down at the bottom because it's not hurting anything here. What did the response say? Can add or update a child row, a foreign key constraint fails. Okay, because we tried to do it in the wrong order. So I'm going to undo that change. Okay, so, well, how could we fix that? Well, let's just put it back in its original order. Okay, that's got the file back in its original order. Okay, now some of these things did run, so let's run the truncate again to get rid of all the data. So run truncate. Okay, that's good. Let's confirm that the tables are empty. Schema inspector. Tables. Yep, they're all empty now. Very good. Okay. Well, let's load the data from the delimited files in the proper order. So again, we'll clear this so we can run it. And look, everything seems to have run okay. Actually, the last one did not run. Zero. Oh, I'm sorry. The one that didn't run is invoice archive. Invoice archive. Oh, yeah. So the last one that didn't run was invoice archive. So that did not run. But invoices worked. There was 114. That's fine. So they all should be good, and then let's go prove to ourselves that they did run right. Schema inspector, tables. Okay, and that looks, those look like the numbers that we were looking for. Maybe not. Let's do a refresh. Let's look at that. Hmm. Yep, there's the 5.8. Yep, I think that's the right count. Okay. If it's not the right count, you can call me up and complain. All right. So, what part of this we have to do for your own project? Well, for the assignment for the coming week, you're just going to have to take what I just did and do the same thing for the My Guitar Shop database. Okay. And again, reminder that there's a recipe for it. And this is the recipe that we followed. I'll make sure that's part of the instructions that I post. Okay, so that should all be good. All right. And then when you're done, you'll have it all in one directory. You'll give the directory the right name, zip it up, and submit the zip file. And that'll be all you need to do. But in your final project, where is this really going to help you? The reloading. I'm going to give you the CSV files for each of the tables. You're going to have built your schema, and you're going to want to load it when it's completely empty of data. So if you've already typed in some informal tested data, you're going to want to truncate them all. Okay, and then you're going to want to do the reload, and then you're going to want to make sure you get the right counts. And that's why we're learning this. And also, it's good to be facile with all these kinds of utility programs. So, good luck on your assignment, and I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.